If spending too much time on YouTube had one benefit, it would be hearing many points of view on any issue. If one were to look for advice on how to start an indie game, how to finish it, how to sell it, one would have gone no further. The question any solo game dev has to ask is, how do I raise my chances? There are many stories of people killing their indie projects after working on them for years. How do we avoid that?
The most common advice beginners get from veterans in the industry is make small games.
And the question is, should indie game developers make small games or big games? It's another point for small games. Okay.
Now, if you're regular on the channel, you might have heard me give the advice of how you should make small games.
You gotta make smaller first games that, hey, you like, you're interested in, but they're not your dream game.
It doesn't make sense to jump into a 4-year-long development cycle when you have never made anything from start to finish. There are these people like Notch and Concert Ape who act as a guiding beacon for any indie game dev starting out. Their success stories are very good on paper, they are very inspiring, and they are also good examples of a survivorship bias. You have to consider what kind of people you use as a reference. CodeMonkey, Tyroller, and Brush are all successful professional indie game devs with many years under their belts. They all have slightly different approaches to game dev, but their conclusions, at least on this topic, converge. They may diverge on others. Let us try to look at a somewhat different opinion. This here is a solo dev behind Slid Studio, responsible for giving birth to Northern Journey. His approach was a success, and his game does not seem to fit what we envision when we say a small game.
Many heretical game devs on YouTube will recommend you to first start with small short games. They say you should only attempt to make the game you want years later. But I know my internal drive does not work like that. I knew I had to start a real game development day one to know the journey to salvation has begun.
Slid's philosophy correlates very well with a certain so-called manifesto invented for finishing projects. It is perfectly summarized in No Boilerplates video called The Cult of Done.
Life is full of small-minded people with narrow horizons, and they're all trying to kill you. They'll kill you with words like, be reasonable, play it safe, and the worst, stay in your lane. You don't have to listen to these people. You don't have to listen to anyone. I recommend listening to the people who are building the things you love, painting the paintings you love, and writing the musical stories you love.
It is a slightly different language from what we've heard Tyroller, Brush, CodeMonkey, and Zukavsky say. So who do we listen to? I wouldn't say these points of view should be considered as opposite, but rather they complement each other. In order to decide on the approach that fits you the most, you must have the full picture. Before I move on, Cult of Done has even more good stuff.
Everything is a draft. It helps to get it done. Prototypes make it to production, quick sketches become long-term plans, and things you write down to get them out of your head end up in the final, published book. It doesn't have to be perfect. It never will be, even after it's done. Laugh at perfection. It's boring and keeps you from being done.
I found it quite liberating to mentally mark every asset I make, every line of code I write as I will fix it later, if need be. If I won't, so be it. But at least I'll actually goddamn finish something that way. When I am about to fall into a trap of assuming that only one opinion deserves my attention, I like to think back to proverbs and how easy it is to be misled by them. Proverbs are these concise packets of compressed wisdom that are very satisfying to refer to when making a point. We as humans really like defaulting to them. However, if you hear enough of those, you will find that a lot of them directly contradict each other. For example, the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. Many hands make light work, but too many cooks spoil the broth. You're never too old. The word of the day is nuance, or context, or it depends, that's 2 words. Making shorter games makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. At the same time, for some people, in some instances, making longer ones is the only possible solution to move forward and succeed. Whether you have enough justification to make a big or a small game may as well depend on what do you actually want to make. So let us explore this next. As a gamer, myself, I gravitate towards certain genres. I spend a lot of time in survival craft games, and maybe even more in roguelikes. I enjoy Western RPGs, and I love Metroidvanias. I can't put into words how nostalgic I am for old school action-adventure titles. So what? Do I just go and make an immersive RPG with survival and crafting? Will it also have an open world and an intricate action combat system? Will it have branching narratives and a convoluted storyline, all at the same time? Even if I could imagine a game like that, the chances of me finishing it aren't very encouraging. But there is a silver lining to it. People always talk about making their dream game. I keep thinking to myself, just one? Am I supposed to have just one? Over the years, I kinda accumulated a lot of ideas. Some of them keep me up at night. Others are just neat to think about. As a result, I have a gradient of dream games. Some of them are much easier to make than others. Some of them I can imagine finishing within a few months. Let's get back to the Slid guy. He may have gone with his dream project right away, but listen to what his reasoning was when he did.
So I chose the game ID most accessible, the most well-defined vision I had. A FPS style game set in a northern land. A game that used common game controls and mature game mechanics well established. A game similar to other games. I did not want to spend time innovating new systems on this first game. My time was to be used on the actual content of the game. The time was to be spent making it.
He did not begin developing an open world MMORPG. He stuck with mechanics that are grounded and time-tested for an adventure FPS game. His development process is very unique. He may not have innovated much mechanically, but that allowed him to save time and innovate visually, stylistically, narratively.
There are a lot of people making great games, and you are competing with almost all of them. There are only two strategies to deal with that competition. A, you do something better and you win the competition. Or B, you do something different and don't even engage in the competition. When somebody tells you need a unique selling point, what they actually mean is, don't freaking park your ship on top of another ship. Don't make a game that exists already, but worse. That is a horrible idea. On the other side of the spectrum, this ship is floating in a swirl of colors. Oh my god, so creative, but nobody can even tell it's a ship anymore. This is the equivalent of making a super innovative artsy-fartsy game that eventually nobody's interested in. Do not make a unique game for an alien species.
You've probably played games that look or feel or work in some way similar to Slid's Northern Journey, but you never really played a game just like it. Too much innovation isn't only damaging to your marketing potential, it's also a straight road to biting off more than you can chew and grinding down to a halt in your development process. I had to learn that lesson on my own skin when I was working on my 3D Sudoku game. I had up to 5 different game modes in mind. Did I begin with the most basic and simple one? Nope, I did not. I began building my prototype with some kind of a hybrid mode that I thought could work but had actually no idea if it would. Who does that? Needless to say, I got stuck trying to make this weird, not Sudoku work until I just threw it out and focused on a simple 4x4 mode instead. And that is a lesson learned if I ever saw one. The bottom line is as follows. Balance between what is exciting and what is doable. You can make a bigger, longer project, but if it's your first, you probably have to build it on a simple, well-established foundation, like Slid did. If you want to innovate and introduce some new mechanics or variations on game formulas, you're better off picking a smaller project so that you have room to maneuver. Oh, and one of the worst things you could do for your first project is to make it a multiplayer game. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a game with an overhead view where you control a hero, upgrade his abilities, and go around an open world, completing quests and interacting with NPCs. But then, you could also buy property and start expanding your economical empire like in a city builder, while still being able to control your character for some boots on the ground gameplay. But then, as your influence increases, you can hire an army and lead them into battle yourself, or send them on missions to act in your stead. A game where you could switch between action RPG, RTS and a city builder on the fly, and every part of it seamlessly interacts with all other parts, and none of them suck.
If you are thinking, I'm going to make the perfect game, my first game, you will never finish it or you're just going to die, basically.
This looks like a project that could put an entire AAA company into the ground, and I am not an entire company. I'm just one dude.
Like, if you think about it, an RPG is really a lot of genres stacked together. It's like, you've got experience, like incremental experience and spending it on upgrades. You've got a narrative, just typing the story, writing out a story is a game. You've got kind of the battle, whatever your battle, whether it's real time or, turn-based, you've got a battle system. You have like an exploration where you're like exploring the overworld. So that's like 4 or 5 games just for an RPG.
What I can do instead is I can start with my smaller dream games, which can act as one isolated part of the big one, like pieces of a puzzle. So, in theory, on paper, I can divide the magnum opus game I envisioned into smaller games, like a narrative game with dialogues and branching choices, a combat-focused game like a roguelike, a city builder game that doubles as a card game, a small-scale RTS game with some unique gimmick.
This is why you should not make an RPG for your first game, because it's actually like 6 games duct taped together and presented to you.
Each one will grant me the required experience and yield tangible results in relatively short stretches of time. Then, when all games from this list are done, and only then can I move on to the big one. Now, let me outline what I am planning to do with all this. I will be making an over-the-head roguelike with an emphasis on ranged combat. Think of it as a shooter Diablo-like with larger number of fodder enemies instead of a lesser number of stronger enemies. I will be talking out of my ass for the next part, meaning that I do not have any references to following thoughts, I've just formed them over the years. Video games aren't made equal. A seemingly simple game may have unexpected complexity to it. In my mind, the simplest kind of a game to deal with mechanically would be a turn-based one. In such a game, you don't deal with real-time logic. Everything is governed by clearly defined causes and effects, which are set in motion only at the points of player input. As soon as you begin working on an action game, suddenly you need to make everything work and click together while performing calculations at least 60 times per second. This is where things start to break down. When you add physics to the action game, it becomes even harder to avoid mistakes. Colliders may pass through each other if they are moving too fast. Characters can get stuck on cliffs or terrains. Hitboxes don't match or cause lag. The world of real-time physics in video games is built upon compromises and carefully considered trade-offs. But all of that is nothing compared to multiplayer features. Multiplayer is where the inexperienced go to die, because whatever problems you could run into making a single player game, they will be multiplied 1,000-fold in a multiplayer one. For my first serious project, I want to land on the level 2 of this spectrum, an action game without any physics except the simplest forms of collisions. I want to develop the skills needed to make a character interact with a large number of simple enemies. I want to work with object pooling to support large number of projectiles and all the systems needed to make it all work. I want to build an upgrade system and feel how games are expanded mathematically. I want to polish the UI/UX part because it is one of the last things we think about, but it may be one of the most important for the game to feel like an actual game and not a student project. I don't want to deal with physics or elevation. This will be my way of shaving off complexity so that I can invest time into scale and polish. I separated what I planned for the game into several categories. We can call them essential to do, important to do, and bonus round. Within those sets there is still wiggle room because some decisions are easier to implement than other ones. The goal is to finish the project. I have a set of features in mind, but if I come to a conclusion that they take too long to implement or I lack the skill to tackle them at this point in time, I will shave them off. If that diminished plan gets too difficult as well, I will cut it down some more. In my mind, I refer to it as a Motte-Bailey method, similar to an informal fallacy by the same name. If the Motte proves to be impossible to defend, I retreat to the Bailey, and repeat. These are the underlying pillars of this project. It's what I envisioned this game to be, and they represent the core or the minimum of what I need in this game. It has to be a game with an overhead view that revolves around crowd control. One of the main mechanics would be poise breaking the enemies, slowing them down, making them tumble and fall, pushing them back and around. I want to shorten the game loop compared to most roguelikes, so that runs can either be completed faster or they are broken into discrete segments. I envision a system where character upgrades aren't set, but instead can be moved around using an inventory system in the middle of the run, which will play into shortening the loop even further. You will have more opportunity to adjust your build without the need to start the run anew. That is what I have for now, and what I will reference moving forward. Making video checkpoints of my progress takes time and effort, and I knew that it would. I knew there would be pitfalls and bumps in the road. This is just another skill I will need to improve on this journey. My strategy is to release a video of a certain stage of my production only when the next stage is already finished. I've spent the past 2 months refreshing all the processes of concepting, modeling, scripting, and bringing it all together in my mind. It took a bit of stumbling around, but now I'm on the right track again. I've also taken a detour with this quick project I've made in 2 weeks. I will be making a video about it later. There is also a backlog of stuff I've already made and recorded, or stuff that I can make a short tutorial out of, and I intend to try and use those smaller videos as intermissions between proper devlogs. If not for any other purpose, I need these videos to be recorded and saved here for myself, to have a visual track of my progress and to be able to get a glimpse of my state of mind in the past. All that said, I'll see you next time, when I will be talking about this, or this, or this. Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to make a video about the Sudoku game. Right. Oh.